Yes. Hello. Yes. So last time on our previous episode, we were discussing about in still in line with our theme or our topic, understanding the purpose and power of praise and worship. We were dealing on what what's God's greatest desire and man's greatest need. And God's greatest desire is that and man's greatest need is that there might be a fellowship between spirit and spirit, that is us and God. That is his greatest desire. And so our focus was in the how environment affects the efficiency or the fruitfulness of a product. Yes. And so I remember I left the episode hanging because I felt I needed maybe to do a little bit on research about the similarities between the Garden of Eden and now the temple structure that Solomon built, that is the Temple of Jerusalem, how it was built. Because the temple being built was a way of God trying to reintroduce his original intention of how man and God should be relating. And so the construction, because even the temple being constructed, the way Moses was being given the instructions on how to go about the tabernacle, that was a direction from God, because only God who knows what can be done for us to regain our fellowship with Him. And so today we'll be identifying or we'll be learning the similarities between the Garden of Eden, which was the presence, sorry, which was the original idea of God when He was creating as a presence for man to dwell and for man to be fruitful in it. And so, first of all, what we can say is that the Garden of Eden was a place where man and God had a smooth fellowship. Yeah. And also in the temple, there were things that were to be observed. And that is where, and the priest always went once. That is to the Holy of Holies, to maybe to hear what God had for the Israel. And that would be once in a year. That is what sin made us to like. We can go in the presence of God like, and not all of us, just one person, once in a year. That is that that was crazy. But we thank God now it's different. We have the temple that is us. We are our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Like God now dwells in us. But let's go back to the Garden of Eden and the temple. So one thing is that God is holy, and for us to approach God or to dwell in His presence, we have to be holy like He is. And so once man fell, is it protocols or procedures had to be brought for us to observe them, for us even to approach or to maybe come closer to His holiness, which is kind of hard without His help. So He has to intervene still. Yeah. So the first similarity between the both of them is that both are dwelling places for God. In the Garden of Eden, God dwelt amongst them. That is, He was in the presence of, He was among Adam and Eve. And the same way in the temple, that is where God dwelt. And mostly in the Holy of Holies, because now the temple is divided into various divisions, as we'll be coming to learn it as we're proceeding. So both of them are dwelling places of God and they are places of worship. In the Garden of Eden, that was a place of worship. And remember, I said worship is not, it doesn't have to do so much with us singing and praising. Worship is just a way of life. That is how you live. Like you are living with acknowledgement that there is a higher being, that there is someone who is higher, who is responsible for your life, and you acknowledge him and you are in alignment with what he says about your life and how you should go about your life. I think for me that is how worship has to do. It has to do more with how you live your life. And so for Adam and Eve, how they lived their life in the Garden of Eden, that is worshiping God. And now we can say the Garden of Eden was a place of worship. The same way, even in the temple, that was a place of worship because that is where they could go and offer their sacrifices. During certain festivals, they would go and offer sacrifices till there were so there's so many things that they did in the temple. And another thing that the similarities of the sacred, they have sacred geographical and access. In terms of their geography, it's sacred, and even accessing them is sacred. First of all, we can see that the Garden of God, the Garden of Eden, it was sacred in terms of like it had the way it was divided, like it had a tree of life in it, it had a tree of knowledge of good and evil in it, then it had these rivers that was producing precious things, gold, and that other one pearls. Like that is so sacred. The same as the temple. The temple was built, the walls were lined or coated with gold, the doors were made of gold, and the more you go to the holy of holies, like the holy of holies was purely gold. So that was something that is so sacred. And even the geography, the way it had specific areas. Like in the garden, we had the central part where we had the tree of life. And then in the temple, to Kona, we have to move from the outer court, the holy, the holy sanctuary, and then the holy of holies. Like that geography, like it's becoming more complex. It's not the same everywhere. Yes, so that's another similarity. And then another thing is that the imagery of trees and nature. First of all, the tree of life, it shows like the presence of God in their midst. Like you have the life in Ikwapo to like the tree of life. And then we have the river flowing, like in symbolism, like as you read the Bible later, you come to learn that the word of God is like water. It washes. So like there was God life there, and then there was this water that cleanses maybe, and then the temple. Still how it was constructed. On the outer court it had a, what is it called? It's called a brazen, it had its brazen sea. Yeah. And it was there outside that was used to cleanse so many things. And then under the temple there was water flowing to cleanse maybe the blood of the sacrifices and all that, just to maintain or to keep the temple clean all the time. That was water, both of them, to show sanctification and cleansing that is happening continuously every day in that presence. And then another thing is that both of them have cherubim guardians. But at the beginning, the cherubims were not there. These are angels like creatures. Yeah. But at the beginning, they were not there. But immediately man fell. Cherubims are angels that protect God's holiness. They are there to guard God's holiness. Remember, man at the beginning was holy, was holy as God, so they were not mentioned. But immediately man fell. This is what happens. God commands two cherubims to stand at the east entrance direction of the garden to guard the garden from man accessing the garden or the tree of life, to prevent man from coming to eat the tree of life. And so the cherubims are to guard the holiness of God. So if something is not holy, it cannot access the presence of God. The cherubims are going to destroy you. So that is another similarity. And even in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, there were big statues in that now room, because now the temple is divided into three. We have the outer court, the holy then we have the holy sanctuary, and then we had the Holy of Holies. In the Holy of Holies, we had the Ark of the Covenant, and then we have two statues of cherubims. These are angels with their wings were so huge according to the structure that one wing would touch the wall, and then the other wing was like that. Then the other wing would touch the wall, and then near the middle we had the Ark of the Covenant. Yes. And you remember, according to the church, if when a priest that once in a year was getting into the Holy of Holies, they would tie a rope and a bell on the leg of the priest as he was getting, in case maybe the holiness hadn't gotten to the standard that God was requiring at the moment, that person would automatically die. And so what they would do, they just pull him out. Okay, that is how God is serious when it comes to holiness. He doesn't joke around with that. So the cherubims were there to protect God's holy. The Ark of the Covenant was like maybe in symbolism of showing that this is God. Like you cannot go there. The people were guarding that holiness and all that. Yeah, so the cherubims are there in both the Garden of Eden and the temple structure, and both of them, they are there to guard the holiness of God. But now, yes, you remember the story of Isaiah when he was it a vision, something of the sort. Yeah, I think we should read that. Let's read. It is in Isaiah. Then we have this angel who was surrounding the throne, who came and touched. And Isaiah was saying that I'm a man of unclean lips. Mm-hmm. That is. Mm-hmm. So it's in Isaiah chapter 6. Let me just read from 1 to 7. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above with him was seraphim, each with six wings. With 2 wings they cover their faces, with 2 they cover their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. and the sound of their voices, the post and threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Oh, to me, I cried, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. So, like, here we have two types of angels. We have the cherubims who protect God's holiness, and then you have the seraphim who now also guard the holiness of God and now are responsible for maybe sanctifying man as he comes to God's presence. Because the other day, the seraphim. The seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, with which he had taken with thanks from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. That is what cleansed Isaiah. And now from there he gets his instructions. So what we get is that cherubims protect the holiness of God, and for us to approach God, holiness must be observed. We must be holy. Another, the fifth similarity is that priestly law of there is a priestly law in both of them. So first of all, Adam was the first priest. Remember, after God placed him in the Garden of Eden, that is in Genesis 2. After he placed him in the Garden of Eden, he commands Adam to work the garden and keep it. To work and to keep it. The same as in the temple. In Numbers, there were responsibility that the priest was supposed to do in keeping the temple maybe clean, doing their priestly duties, if it's sacrifices, they are supposed to do certain things. You remember even the story of Zachariah when the angel of God appears to him to give him the news of John the Baptist's being conceived. He was doing his priestly duties. So, like in the presence of God, there is a work we all have to do. There is a part you're playing to keep the temple or the presence of God live and active and fruitful in in our in our surrounding. There is work to be done. And then we have the eastward orientation. Like the Garden of Eden and the temple, they have an eastward orientation. That is meaning from east to west, that is going back to the presence of God. You remember when they were chased, the cherubims were placed in the east of the garden to guard it. That means that is where the entrance was. And so if the entrance is in the east, you're entering to the west the same way. The temple structure was in the eastward direction, is that the outer court was like this east, and then as you're moving towards the Holy of Holies, you're going in the west direction. So that is that similarity. So and it is just to show us that us going back to the presence of God, there is that east-west direction we follow. Then there is this similarity of exile from God presence. Immediately, the guidelines or the regulations set for maintaining or working in the presence of God are defiled or are not followed, there is exile, or you're being cast away from the presence of God. From the story of Adam and Eve, they were cast out of the presence of God. The same way, the temple immediately they started now, all sort of defilement started happening in the temple, and they stopped observing the ritual that was supposed to be done. The temple was destroyed. It was burnt down by the Romans. It was completely destroyed. But we thank God still, we have the new temple who is Jesus, and now through Jesus, that temple becomes us, like He dwells in us. That's good news. And those are the major similarities between the temple and the Garden of Eden. And why have I talked about that today? It's because, first of all, those were the main the Garden of Eden. That was the original idea of how God wanted man and him to always fellowship, like to be always to always be in the same fellowship. And that was only possible if that environment was maintained. But now that environment was destroyed because of our sinful nature. God still, who is loving, merciful, and still has good plans for us, He comes up with another idea. Okay, you sinned, so let's do this way. I'm going to bring myself a part of. It's not like a whole of me, like a part of me is going to be with you, but I'm just going to give you a structure that if you follow still the guidelines and make sure you observe these rules and obey my commands in when it comes to the temple and when it comes to sacrificing to this